They met again at Peoria later that month, even though Douglas was reluctant to debate against, in his words, the most difficult and dangerous opponent I have ever met. In 1858, the two debated 7 times in Illinois, at Ottawa, Freeport, Jonesboro, Charleston, Galesburg, Quincy, and Alton. Enormous crowds turned out for each confrontation, and newspaper coverage was widespread. In the high-profile debates, the two focused on laws and legal decisions governing slavery: the Northwest Ordinance, Missouri Compromise, Compromise of 1850, Kansas-Nebraska, Dred Scott. They distinguished between natural and human rights. Lincoln declaring to the chagrin of his admirers today, "I agree with Judge Douglas that the black man is not my equal in many respects, certainly not in color, perhaps not in moral or intellectual endowment. But in the right to eat the bread," Lincoln concluded, without the leave of anybody else, which he himself earns with his own hands, he is my equal and the equal of Judge Douglas and the equal of every other man. They debated the principles of slavery in moral terms, and this is where Lincoln most excelled. "That is the real issue," said Lincoln at Alton. "That is the issue that will continue in this country when these poor tongues of Judge Douglas and myself shall be silent. It is the eternal struggle between these two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. They were the two principles that have stood face to face from the beginning of time and will ever continue to struggle. The one is the common right of humanity, the other the divine right of kings. The founders set up a standard maxim of free society," Lincoln said, "which should be familiar to all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence and augmenting the happiness and value of life to all people of all colors, everywhere." Lincoln turned famous words from his hero Henry Clay against Douglas. "Judge Douglas is going back to the era of our Revolution," Lincoln said at Ottawa, "and muzzling the cannon which thunders its annual joyous return. When he invites any people willing to have slavery to establish it, he is blowing out the moral lights around us. When he says he cares not whether slavery is voted down or voted up, he is penetrating the human soul and eradicating the light of reason and the love of liberty in this American people." Lincoln, we know, did not slay his dragon in 1858. Douglas was returned to the Senate. However, in the course of the debates, Lincoln did cause Douglas to utter his Freeport doctrine, which turned popular sovereignty against the slave states. According to Douglas, regardless of what the branches of the federal government had to say about it, the people could, by lawful means, quote, "exclude slavery from their limits." This opinion would splinter the Democratic Party when Douglas won its nomination for president in 1860, and once Lincoln won the Republican nomination, his victory over Douglas was all but assured. Now, people often ask why Lincoln, once he took the oath of office as president, didn't immediately emancipate the slaves and achieve his ambition. The short answer is that he did not have the constitutional power to do so unilaterally. The more complex answer is that 2 trials remained: Roger Taney's Supreme Court and the struggle through the Civil War to preserve the Union. First, Chief Justice Taney's reprehensible Dred Scott opinion proved that he would defend the institution of slavery if at all possible. To overcome Taney, then, Lincoln would have to accomplish emancipation through unquestionably constitutional means. This is why Lincoln favored an emancipation scheme that was gradual, compensated, and consensual. His plan, which he tried to implement in Delaware, was to offer a federally financed compensation scheme to persuade the slave states themselves to abolish slavery by an act of their own legislatures. Taney could not object if the states themselves emancipated. Historian Alan Galzo and others have also argued that this is why Lincoln overturned 2 emancipation schemes implemented by his generals. He did not believe that they would hold up in court, and therefore he did not believe that they would accomplish permanent emancipation. Furthermore, these schemes would harm Lincoln's chances in the greatest trial of his life, the prosecution of the Civil War. More than is commonly recognized, the border states, slave states that remained in the Union, were key to the defeat of the Confederacy. One sharp jolt, one careless word, one idiot in newly made shoulder straps practicing a little emancipation scheme writes Galzo, and the whole border might fall over to the Confederate hands, and that would be the end of it all for Lincoln, the North, and the slaves. The border states held the wheat, corn, meat, and manufacturing that the cotton-bloated South lacked. They accounted for more than 1/3 of the white population in the South, and they controlled the great inland rivers, the Ohio, the Mississippi, the Potomac, that were the highways of the American economy. In other words, should Lincoln or his generals scare the border states into the hands of the Confederacy, the war would soon be over, the Union broken, government of the people, by the people, and for the people would perish. We know now that Lincoln decided on issuing the Emancipation Proclamation in the fall of 1862 before writing his now famous letter stating, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." Lincoln had already chosen the latter course. Using his power as commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, Lincoln took the one decisive action that Roger Taney's Supreme Court could not challenge, and that would not rouse the border states into rebellion. As a war measure, he declared slaves in the rebellious states thenceforward and forever free. Only by the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, passed by Congress with Lincoln's vigorous encouragement and approved by the states in December 1865, would all of the slaves and all of the states be forever free. Of course, Lincoln did not live to see that day. Struck down by an assassin's bullet, Lincoln completed his final hero's journey, the way heroes from around the world often do. "Many of them give their lives," said Joseph Campbell. But then the myth also says that out of given life comes new life. "A legendary hero is usually the founder of something new," Campbell continued. "The founder of a new age, the founder of a new religion, the founder of a new city, the founder of a new way of life." Lincoln knew what he was founding when he spoke at Gettysburg. "These dead shall not have died in vain," he said there. "This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom." A new birth of freedom was accomplished for a whole nation of people by a depressed man born into poverty in the backwoods of Kentucky. 200 years after his birth, it is important to remember that what is heroic about Abraham Lincoln. By recalling his better angels, we may be better able, when our trials come, to call upon the better angels of our own nature. Thank you.